Okay, today I'd like to cover loops. I'm going to introduce you to loops. We're going to talk about it, and I have some code I'm going to go over to kind of show you how this works. A loop is basically doing something repetitive over and over again. We can set up our programs to do that for us, so we don't have to have long, stringy code. We can have concise logic to our code and things. So let's go ahead and dive in. So again, loops allow us to repeat code over and over again for a number of times. It could be a set number that we know. It could be until a certain condition changes or what have you. But it basically allows us to repeat code over and over again. So here are the steps that you go for a loop. You start it, you initialize it. There's a test condition that you have to check, and it always returns Boolean, true or false. And there's, by the way, there's two kind of loops. There's a for and a while. We'll start off here with a for, and then I'll show you the while in a little bit. But we're going to check that test condition, whether it's true or false. If it's true, we're going to perform the action within a loop. If it's false, we stop the loop. And then we're going to update our counter. So the for loop construction is like you see at the bottom of your screen. We initialize your loop. Then you have your test condition that tests whether it's true or false. And then we update our counter. And then inside of our for loop is when we do something. Okay. Now, a lot of times when you're working with loops, many times they go hand in hand with arrays. In fact, get it in your head that when you have an array in your program, that in the back of your mind, you got to start thinking, okay, at some point I'm going to have to loop over this array to do something, whatever my program does. So let's revisit it. I've talked about this before, but I want to make sure we have a firm grasp of what arrays are. Arrays are just normal variables. So like we have variable myArray equals new array. The difference between them and regular variables, quote unquote, is that you can store more than one piece of information in them. I like to think of them like an accordion file folder. So you have an accordion file folder, that's one unit, like your variable. But you have multiple slots, so you can store multiple pieces of information in that accordion file folder. But by doing it as one variable like myArray, we can reference our information in there by myArray. So we can grab that one file folder and reference our stuff in there. So we can store multiple pieces in one location by referencing it in one location. Now each item in an array has a key, and that's basically the position of that array, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And so that value of the key is always in brackets. So whenever you see brackets in coding, typically it references an array. Now one thing to remember about a key though that you got to get into your mind, and I struggled with this when I started coding, is keys start at 0. Arrays are 0 based. So the first position is position 0, key value 0. Position 1, key value 0. So your first slot in your array is 0, second is 1, third is 2, and so on. So if you were like I am, when I first started programming, I made that mistake all the time where I would ask for what I thought was position 1. Instead of putting a 0, I'd put a 1 in there, because logically in my mind I was thinking 1 equals 1. And I'd get the second value. The other problem with that line of thinking is because arrays are 0 based, like here on your screen you see I have 3 items, first, second, and third. If I ask for my array 3, it's going to return undefined because that doesn't exist. So just keep that in mind. If you're working with arrays and you get an undefined, check your keys, making sure that they're okay. Now, a thing about loops you got to be aware of is infinite loops. Loops that go on and never end. That'll cause a lot of problems. I've crashed servers creating infinite loops. So check and recheck and test your update logic. For example, in my example here, I have a variable that's equal to 5. So in my condition, in my for loop, in the second test condition, it's x greater than 4. Again, that returns true or false. If that's greater than 4, and notice I'm incrementing it, so the first time it runs, x is 5. The second time, x is 6. The third time, x is 7. See, my test condition will never return false. So that means my do something function will always be running. It'll run over and over and over and over again. What will happen is you'll get the hanging circle, and your program will hang, and probably end up having to restart server, restart the browser at the very least, restart your computer, something like that. So make sure that you test that so you don't get an infinite loop. Now, the two main ways to update a loop counter: the plus plus minus minus, so increment and decrement. Add 1, subtract 1. Depends which one you use, is up to you. Most often you'll find in most programs you'll use the incremental one, but you can subtract as well. You just got to make sure your logic is correct in your loop. Now, another thing is that when we go through the code, you'll see this in my code after my little presentation here. Sometimes we'll use variables to kind of keep track of status where we're at. You'll see this in the modularization of our code. When we start hitting record sets, there'll be a variable called this.position that will be used to kind of keep track of where we're at in our code. So in this case, for example, I have a variable myvar equal to -1. So what that allows us to do is we can check that value to see what our logic is and make decisions based on that. For example, let's say I have a program where I'm asking the end user to put in their age. And I have a global variable that I've set to variable my age equals -1. Well, I can check in my code to see if they've supplied that value. I can say, if my age is equal to -1, ask the user their age, because nobody is -1. Okay, so we can use that to kind of check where we're at and make sure that our logic is sound within our program. Now, the other thing is we want to make sure that we have an exit out of our loop. Okay, there's a couple different ways to get out of our loop. Okay, and let me back up a step. Why might you want to get out of a loop? You might be going through a loop, and when your program gets to a certain state, you might want to stop that loop before it hits the end. You might already have an end. Now, let's say you're running your loop 10,000 times, but you want that if certain conditions arise to where you want that loop to stop before it hits 10,000, if certain conditions present themselves in your code, then you need a way to stop it, or else it's still going to run to 10,000 times. It'll make your program less efficient. So there used to be a hack way we did it, where we said I equals my array length plus 1 so that we could return our condition as false. That was buggy and it was hacky. A better choice is the break statement. So if we want to stop a loop, all we got to do is, and typically it's done within an if statement, if something is, a condition is set, we run that break statement, bingo, it stops our loop and it jumps to the next line of the code. There's also a continue statement that forces the loop to stop and jump to the next cycle. That's used less often than a break statement, but it is out there in case you ever run into it. So we'll use a break statement in some of our labs. You'll see that, and we'll use it here as well. Now, sometimes you'll need to check multiple conditions. So how do we test multiple conditions? It can get hairy doing that. We could have multiple if statements and nest them. If condition 1 is true, then inside of there, if condition 2 is true, then inside there, if condition 3 is true. My rule of thumb is I don't like to go beyond 3 nestings because I get confused, and so I wouldn't recommend you do it either. But there is a way we can combine these using the ampersands and the AND operator to combine 2 or more Boolean statements. So if condition 1 and condition 2 and condition 3. Now here's the caveat to this. In order for this if statement that you see on your screen to return true, all 3 conditions need to be true. So let's say in our example, condition 2 is false. So condition 1 is true, condition 3 is true, but condition 2 is false. Because we're using the ands, we're saying all 3 have to be true. The entire statement would be false if just one of them is false. In order to have something return true, we'd have to use the double pipes, which is the OR operator, not the AND operator. So just keep that in mind. Now, previously I showed you the for loop. This is the while loop. Sometimes you'll use these interchangeably. Typically you use a for loop when there is a known loop count, such as the length of an array. You know you're going to loop through a number of times whatever your array length is, or whatever number you set. A while loop says keep doing this as long as the condition's true, and then you change that condition. You may not know how long that is, but sometimes they're interchangeable. And so sometimes it comes down to personal style. But these are the 2 most common loops are for and while. There's a third one called a do while loop. You run into that much less. Occasionally it comes in handy, but that's a rarer occasion than a for and a while loop. But the steps to a while loop are you test your condition, you perform your action if test condition's true, so if it returns true, again it's Boolean, true, false, and then you repeat. So instead of a for loop while you have your test condition in there, then you're going to perform some action. Okay. Now make sure that whatever action you perform within your while loop affects your test condition, or else you'll get an infinite loop. So just be careful of that. Make sure it affects that. So again, like I said before, I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. Which one do you choose, for or while? It's up to you, whichever works best with your particular situation. So they can be interchangeable, but typically for numeric counters, you use for, and typically for non-numeric, you use while. Typically. Doesn't always have to be that way. And now sometimes it's possible in your condition that a loop never gets called, and that's where a do-while loop comes in handy because it runs at least once. But it is possible it never gets called. Maybe there's times you want that. So the other thing is we can nest loops. We can't have one loop inside of another one. You're going to see that when we go through the code. So just like we can nest if statements and things, we can nest loops. Now, earlier we talked about arrays. Two-dimensional arrays, we talked about that earlier in the semester, but I want to rehash it here. This is one accordion file inside of another accordion file. So let's say I say var myArray equals new array 2. If I don't put anything in those parentheses, it's a single one-dimensional array. Here I put in a 2, so it tells it it's a two-dimensional array. And so earlier you saw me myArray bracket 0, myArray bracket 1, and so on and so forth. So I was getting in the first slot of the accordion file folder, the second, and the third as we went on. With a two-dimensional array, imagine if you take your accordion file folder, then you take another accordion file folder, and you stuff it in the first slot of your initial accordion file folder. So now, in the first slot of your accordion file folder, you have another accordion file folder with all these spots in it that you can put stuff. That's a two-dimensional array. Now the way we access it is like you see on your screen there where it says myArray bracket 0 bracket 0. What that says is go into myArray, my accordion file folder, and access the first spot. Okay? Inside there, as we said earlier, is another accordion file folder. So we're saying access this first slot of that. So if we go myArray 0, 1, we're saying go into the first slot of the outside array file folder, and then go into the second slot of the inside one. So we're going to see that as we go through our code and mess with our code. So another way, sometimes a two-dimensional array is also called an array of an array. So if you run across that, you'll see that as well. Now, several different ways to create arrays. You saw me do var myArray equals new array 2. You can do var myArray equals new array, and then you can set up your two-dimensional array slots in there with new array and then whatever number you want. You can even initialize it saying var myArray equals first value, second value, so you can go ahead and load the values in it. You're going to see us do that within our code when we get to our code. And then a two-dimensional array, you'll see var myArray equals bracket bracket and then have it in it. So you're going to see that in our code. So anytime you see brackets, usually that means array. If you see two brackets, a two-dimensional array. Okay. Another way to think about two-dimensional arrays, if the file folder is not a helpful example for you, maybe think of it in terms of a table like an Excel spreadsheet of columns and rows. Maybe that might be a better way, an easier way for you to think about that. Now, how do we loop through a two-dimensional array? Well, if we have two dimensions, rows and columns, we need two loops. So this is where we do nested loops. So in our example, when we get into our code, we're going to have nested loops because we're going to have a two-dimensional array. And then you can go beyond that, 2D, 3D, 4D, whatever. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Two-dimensional is usually the most you go into. You usually don't go into 3D and 4D. But you can if you want. It just gets rather complex. So now, on a related note, sometimes you want to alter your code in your array, and we're going to actually do that when we get into Learning Plan 6. So you're going to be able to do that. And that's where the push method comes into play. So I can say, as in my little side note there, I can call the push method push a value to my array. So let's say I have a variable myArray and I have a first value and second value. I can then say myArray, call the push method, pass the value of third value to it, and now my array has three values, first, second, and third value. It always go on the end of the array. There's methods to put it on the beginning and stuff like that, but in our example, we can just do push to put it on the end of the array. Now, that's kind of the overview. Let's dive into some code here. Now, here's what we're going to do. We have this application that we've been asked to build. Our clients have approached us. There's these two guys. They want an app that allows them to choose theater seats. But here's the wrinkle. They want 3 in a row because they want an empty seat in between them to put their popcorn and not have to share armrests and all that stuff. So they want 3 seats in a row. So as you can see from our row right here, we have 3 seats right in the middle. So when I click Find Seat, Seat 2 is available, accept. Seat 4 is available, accept, and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at our code, and then we're going to go through several iterations so you can see how we're going to adjust this to make it work the way our clients want it to work. So in here in my code, I have, first of all, on line 6, I have a variable seats, which you see a bracket. It's an array, and I'm initializing the array right at the beginning with false, true, false, true. This is my row of seats, a single dimensional array, false, true, false, true. So if I reload here, see false, true, 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 false, true, true, or sorry, true, false, which corresponds to my options here. So we're saying what seats are available when aren't. The grayed ones aren't available, the red ones are. So if they're not available, it's false. If they are available, it's true. I then have this global variable, cell seat, stands for selected seat, set to -1, so we can check to see whether they selected a seat or not. And then I have this init seats function. Now let's go down, and I jumped ahead of myself just a touch. Let's go down and look at the HTML. All it is a div tag with some images of our seats, seat 0s through seat 8. The reason I named them that is because, remember, our arrays are 0 based, and then we've got a button that when we click on it, it's going to run the find seat function. And we have, when our page loads, it's going to run the init seats function. Now notice initially our source of our image is blank. We're going to initialize it with the init seats function. So let's go back and let's take a look at that function. So in our init seats function, we have a for loop. So we have a variable of I. As long as I is less than seats.length, it's going to run and increment every time. Now seats.length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's the length of our array. We're calling the length property of our array to find out what it is. So it's going to start off the first time it runs, I is going to be 0, and it's going to be less than 9. So here I've got an if statement. If seats, and then I'm passing my I variable to it. So the first time this loop runs, the value of I is going to be 0, so this is going to be seats bracket 0. If I go up to line 6, seats bracket 0 is my very first item. Remember, arrays are 0 based. The next time this loop runs, seats I is going to be, seats bracket I is going to be seats bracket 1, true. Seats bracket 3, the third time, or seats bracket 2, the third time it runs, it's going to be false. The fourth time it runs, it's going to be seats brackets 3, true. So what we're doing is we're just saying if our seat is false or true. So the first time this loop runs, this if statement is going to return false because seats bracket 0 is false. So therefore the code inside of here is not going to run. So therefore our else is going to run. So what happens inside of our else? Well, we're going into our document, we're grabbing our element with the ID of seat, and we're concatenating it here. So in the first time it runs, seat 0. So if we look down here at our HTML, that's going to be this very first image. That very first image tag. And then here's where remember I showed you where the source was blank. Here's where we're affecting our source. We have in our folder, we have 3 images, seat unavail, seat select, and seat avail. So we're saying, okay, seat.source, change it to seat unavail, which is the gray image, is what we're doing. Then set the alt attribute to be unavailable seat. That's an accessibility thing where it will set the alt tab or the alt attribute to that it's unavailable for screen readers and things like that. So we're basically saying go into our document, grab the element with the ID of seat 0, seat 1, seat 2, seat 3, whatever it is, set the source attribute, set the alt attribute, so whatever we say. Now the second time this runs, I is going to be a value of 1. If seats bracket I is going to be if seats bracket 1, which returns true. Therefore, not the else isn't going to run, our if statement's going to run, and same sort of thing, it's just we're setting it to a different image and a different alt value. So that's how we're setting whether it's gray or red based off of our array. False, true, 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 false, true, false, gray, red, gray, red, 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 gray, red, gray. Now, let's take a look. Excuse me. When we click on the find seat button, we're going to run the find seat function. Let's take a look at what that does. Okay. The first thing we're going to do is check and see if a seat was selected. If a seat was already selected, we want to reinitialize and clear everything. So let's say I go here and I say, okay, I'm going to check that. So I selected that. So when I wanted to reinitialize it and have that set to red again, so click Find Seats. No, there, see it's set to red behind there. So we want to reinitialize everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to check that cell seat function, or that cell seat global variable, to see what it is. Is it greater than or equal to 0? If that returns true, then a seat has been selected. I'm going to show you excuse me, later on in the code where we set that cell seat value greater than 0 when they select a seat. So if they have selected a seat, then cell seat's going to be greater than 0, so this will return true. We're going to reset the cell seat to -1 and call our init seats function to reset our seats to the red and the gray. Okay. Then we're going to do a for loop. Same construction as before, with the I, using the I variable and looping through our seats. Same thing as before, if seats, so we're testing whether it's false or true. And if they've selected it, we're going to set our cell seat equal to that number, to I, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, or yeah, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever that seat they selected. Then we're going to say, go into our document, grab our element with the ID just like we did before, change the ping value to seat underscore select, that's that green image, and change the alt to your seat. And then we're going to prompt the user, actually confirm that that's the seat they want. So we have a variable of accept, confirm seat I plus 1 is available to accept. That's where we get seat 2 is available to accept. Now, look at this here, I plus 1. The reason we're doing that is from an end user human readability standpoint. No one's going to understand that's using your computer unless they are a programmer themselves and understand arrays, where if you say seat 0 is available, if it's the first seat. So what we're doing here is we're just adding 1 to it, so when the end user sees it, they see seat 1 is available, not seat 0 is available. Okay. So do they accept, yes or no? So if they accept, it's just going to, it's already set it up here and it's already turned it to green, then it just goes on. However, if they don't accept, so if accept here, so it's not going to be true, it's going to be false, then the user rejected the seat. We're going to set the cell seat back to -1 and set the seat avail back to, so set it back to red and available seat. And then we go through the next one. So seat 01, seat 02, seat 03, seat 1, seat 2, seat 3, so on. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're just looping over it and just checking whether it works or not. And then allowing them to choose. Now, remember they wanted seats. We have some issues here. Let me just cancel through this. Because our customers, our clients wanted to get 3 seats in a row so they could have an empty seat in between them. So here I have seat 2 available, so they could actually just click OK and they could accept all 5 of those seats, even though that's not what they wanted. So let's look at a second iteration and let's make a change here. And let's run it and let's see what seat 2 is available, accept. and then it stops. See, once they accept a seat, that's the first hurdle we got to do, is we got to say, okay, once they accept a seat, stop the program. So let's see how we do that. So go to version 2 here, same array, same cell seat global variable, same init seats function, same find seat function, and let me scroll down here, same HTML, but we're doing something a little differently here. We added a line right here. We're, instead of doing the if not accept, what we're doing is we're saying if they've accepted, break. We're stopping the loop, boom, we're done. We don't have to loop through any more seats, they've already accepted it. And then if they have not accepted, if that returns false, then we're resetting it and going to the next one. So that allows me to say seat 2 is available, accept, no. Seat 4, no. Seat 5, yes. And it stops. Okay? So by just changing our if statement to an if else and adding that one little break statement made it better. Now, let's look at version 3. Let's run it. Seats 4 through 6 are available. See, earlier when we ran 2, remember our clients wanted 3 seats together. So they don't care about seat 2 and they don't care about seat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, seat 8. They don't care about those. They care about 3 in a row. So we don't want to ask them seat 2 is available or seat 8 is available. We want to ask them 4 through 6. So seats 4 through 6 are available, accept, yes or no, we accept. So how do we do that? So let's take a look at version 3. Again, same array variable, same select seat global variable, same init seats function, and if we scroll down, same HTML. But let's look at our find seats here. Okay, first of all, our accept, we changed that a little bit to where we said seats I+1 through I+3, so we could grab the 3 seats that are together, 4 through 6. So we changed that with some concatenation, a little bit of basic math to make it a little nicer. But other than that, it's basically the same, other than we are dealing with 3 seats in a row. So here we changed our if statement. Earlier, you scroll up, we had our if seats I. That's just checking 1 seat. We need to check 3 seats. So here's where we're doing multiple conditions. Remember in my presentation I talked about doing multiple conditions with the ampersand? So we not only need to check this one, but we need to check the seats next to it as well. So by the time when the first time it runs, seats bracket 0. So seats bracket 0, is it available? No. This returns false, so the whole thing returns false, so that's not going to run. Okay? So the next time it's going to run, seats I is going to be seats 1. That's available. But seats I+1, which is 2 right here, that's not available. So the whole thing's going to be false. So the first time it runs is when it hits this, which is 0, 1, 2, 3. So seats 3, yes, that returns true. Seats 4, 3 plus 1, that returns true. Seats 5, or seat 6, which is 3 plus 5. So 4, 5, and 6. So this is seats 3, which is seats 4, which is position 3. Seat 5, which is position 4. Seat 6, which is position 5 in our array. We're just using some simple math to figure that out. Then we set our global variable to what we needed at. So our selected seat with whatever the value of I is set at. And then we need to grab all of those pieces from our code. So here we had to add some more document, get element by ID. So they're all 3 the same. It's just we're doing our current seat and then adding the ones next to it, +1 and +2, like we did in our if statement, just to grab all 3 of them and setting it to the green image. Then we're going to prompt them. Do you want to accept those? If they accept, yes, we've already turned it to green, we've already set the alt, so we break out of it. If they reject it, reset our cell seat back to -1 and reset them as seats available. Okay, so our app is getting better. We now allow them to choose only 3 seats in a row, which is what they want. but we can make it even better. So let's take a look at the next version. So seats 4 through 6 are available except, cancel it or go OK. So let's take a look now from an end user perspective. As you can see, it didn't change, but let's take a look at how we changed it in our code to make it a little better. Same variable, array variable, same cell seat global variable, same init function, same HTML down here. But let's take a look at what we did with our code here. What we did was we did it with a while loop, not a for loop. So within our find seats function, we have a variable I is 0, and we're using this variable finished set to false, meaning we're asking the question, are they finished choosing the seat? And we set it false because initially they're not finished. So you got to think through this logic just a little bit if you're not used to it. So while I is less than the seat's length, we've been doing that in the for loop, okay, that's fine. And then and not finished. So while they're not finished, that not is a negation operator, so it negates and flips around what we are. So while we're not finished, notice we set finished to false, so not, putting an exclamation in front of it, makes the value of finished equal to true. So that's why we set finished equal to false initially, because we're asking logically, keep running this while they're not finished. So we want that to be true, so our while loop keeps running. The same if statement, checking the 3 seats in a row, and the same grabbing the document.getElement by ID items, doing the confirm, same like we did before, except if they've accepted it, instead of doing the break statement, which we could do with a loop, I'm just showing you a little bit different way to do it, we're setting the finished variable equal to true, because then when the while loop runs, if finished is true, we negate this, then it's going to be false, our while loop's going to stop. So it's just a different way to run it rather than last time. Now don't forget, down here at the bottom we're incrementing our loop, because a for loop, it's incremented in the actual loop up top, the conditionals, where here we need to make sure we're changing that condition within our while loop. So it basically is doing the same thing, we're just doing it with a while loop instead of a for loop. Okay, let's go to our last iteration of it. Version 5. Whoa, we've expanded our theater. So basically, before we were working with a single array, here we are working with a two-dimensional array. So this is a accordion file folder with another one stuffed in, or columns and rows, as you can see here. So let's take a look at this, and let me run it first, and then we'll go look at the code. So, oops, let me get rid of that here. I forgot I put that in there. So let's go look at the code, and then I'll come back here and show you what this is doing. Let me loop through there. Okay. So here our variable seats changed. We have double brackets, two-dimensional array. So the first bracket is the first row, false, true, false, true, 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 false, true, false. That's this top row right here. Then the next one, false, true, false, false, true, false, true, true, true. That's this next row. So see how, and they're all separated by commas, how we have one array with 4 arrays inside of it. And then we have our variable is select seat equal to -1. So here we have our init seats function, which is a little different than before because we've got multiple rows to do. So we have, because we have, I mentioned in my presentation, when you have two-dimensional arrays, you got to think we have 2 arrays, one inside of another. We got to run a nested for loop here. So here I'm saying nest my loop, my for loop variable I, just like we did before, but inside there we've got for var j equals 0, so we're using j instead of I. Now let me I'm going to comment out some of the alerts I had going there that were kind of going crazy, because I'm going to use those alerts to kind of show us where we're at, where we're going through this. Here, let me come back up here. Oh, by the way, our HTML, the only thing that we changed is we added more seats. Instead of seats 0 through 8, we added 9, 10, all the way through 35, okay, just to add in our rows. So now let me go back up to our init seats function. So the first time this runs, the value of I is going to be 0, the value of j is going to be 0. So then our if statement, instead of having just seats bracket I, bracket 0, we got to check inside of our array. So we're going to say seats I, seats, and bracket I, bracket j. So the first time this runs, it's going to be 0, 0. So if we go up to our array, so seats 0, seats I, that's this one, and then we got to go in one more level, so that's the second bracket. So seats 0, 0 will be here. The next time our for loop runs, it's going to be seats ij is going to be seats 0, 1, seats 0, 2, seats 0, 3, all the way until the end, and then it's going to, then when it gets to the next level, next row, it's going to be seats 1, 0, 1, 0, seats 1, 1, 1, 2, and so on. And this one's going to be seats 2, 0, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, oops, 2, 2, 2, 3, and so on. So that's why we have a nested loop. So here it's going to run seat 0, and then this loop is going to run until it gets to the end of the row, and then it's going to kick back out to I equals 1, and then j 0 through 8, then I equals 2, j 0 through 8. So that's what this if loop or if statement is going to check. And then we're just going to set our seat value. So here we're going to say grab our element with an ID of seats. Here we got whatever I is times that length plus j. Now we're just doing some math to try to grab our elements. So if we look at down here in our HTML, seat 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all we're doing is doing some math to grab those particular images. So the first time it runs, seats I, the I is going to be 0. Whenever we multiply 0 times something, it returns 0. So whatever our length is, it's going to return 0, and then we're adding it in. So the first time it runs, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? The first time it runs. And we're just changing the source and the alt. Now the next time it runs, I is going to be 1. So if our seats I length is here 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so remember we're on the outer array. So 1 times 4 is 4, plus 0, or plus 0 is going to be 4, plus 1 is going to be 5, 6, and so on. Okay, so we're adding in to figure out what our seats are and where they're at and grabbing them. Okay, feel free when if you're playing with this to alert out what that is. So like here, let me just run a couple here. I'm going to alert, and I'm going to put this in there. Now let's run it. So 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, 13, 15, 16. The reason it's jumping is remember we're testing if those are true or false. So what we're doing is some math using the length to figure out what seat we're at. So let me get rid of that. That's all we're doing there. Same thing on both, but one is if that's true, the other one runs if it's false. Okay. So we're just using that to figure it out. If you are questioning that, just what I would do is take this code, put some alerts in it so you can kind of follow the logic there. Then our find seats function, again, if they've already selected it, we would need to reinitialize. Same while loop as before, it's just now we're having to check the two-dimensional array. 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. So here the first time it runs, it's going to be 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. So 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2. And at least one of those returns false, so the whole thing's going to be false. And so else it's going to reset everything like it did before. And then here, if it gets to this one, they're all going to be true. So then what we're going to do is we're going to have our select seat, we're going to automatically calculate using that same calculation of the I and the J variables that we talked about earlier. And then we're saying grab our elements by ID, and again doing the math, saying, okay, where are we at in our seats? So we're going to grab that, set the source in the alt attributes. Again, prompt them if they want to accept them. If they've accepted, set finish to true and break out of it, or else keep going and don't forget to increment. So what that allows us to do is we've added a two-dimensional array, and so we can then say, okay, seats 4 through 6 in row 1 are available to accept. No. It's looping all the way down and says, okay, seats 7 through 9 in row 2 are available. No, I don't want to sit there. Seats 1 through 3 in row 3 are available. Do you accept? No. Seats 2 through 4 in row 3 are available. Do you accept? No, I want to sit in the middle. 3 through 5, no. 4 through 6, yeah, I'll sit there. And we set finish to true and broke out of our loop. Okay. Now this one's meaty. Okay, if you've not worked with arrays before, this one can be meaty. So I'd encourage you to work through this, play with it, understand the logic. Where I would concentrate if I were you, I see most people, is trying to understand how two-dimensional arrays work. Try to understanding how we reference them by using two keys, the outer key and the inner key, and then understanding how we can use math, because this is not the only time we're going to do this, how we can use math to figure out where we're at in our code. So doing this math and figuring out where we're at as far as in our rows and our seats and everything can be somewhat tricky if you're not used to it. Okay, but it works really slick once you understand kind of how that logic works. So play with this, and if you have any questions, let me know, and happy coding.